clarify our doubt. The issue is when a conformational change occurs in a protein, there could be realignment of amino acids in that conformation, which sometimes can produce a sequence which is homologous to an allergen. So this process can it likely to make an innocuous protein into an allergenic protein, which is a major issue. Is it possible, or have we tested for it?
I haven't. Okay, great. I haven't checked it, but it could be a nice proposal for a nice research as well. I mean, I don't have any knowledge about that, but thank you very much for the inquiry.
Can I add something? HPP does not break covalent bonds, right? So there's no breaking down of structures in any, like proteins or fat acids. And I'll take the opportunity to answer again for the questions concerning to the oxidation of fats. It's not HPP breaking down the double bonds. It's just the air entrapped that oxidizes it. So you may think that HPP are huge vessel with high pressure. So all the things that we learned in chemistry are the reactions concerning to ambient or 1 atmosphere pressure. Now it's like 7,000 bars, right? So it's not HPP breaking the covalent bonds, but the oxygen that's entrapped it. So if we take out the air or the oxygen, there will be no oxidation. So for liquid food, it's really easy. For like meats or other materials that may have entrapped air in the tissues, that's more difficult. But it's still possible. In terms of allergenicity, if I understood, your concern is if we change the conformation, will that induce allergenicity? It's hard to say yes or no, but I would say no, although I'm not in this area. We're planning to do some studies on that, but the opposite, to turn allergenic products into not allergenic products, since it changes the conformation. But as far as I understand, if we are changing it probably turn the proteins not to allergenic ones, like we do with the enzymes. So as you change the structure, you may expose active sites of enzymes and you may not. But you're right, it could, but I didn't see anything concerned to that so far.
Thank you. Please.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Mark Rosegrant with the International Food Policy Research Institute. Yeah, this is a question for the last speaker. In your sort of dilemma between the circular economy and purity, where do you come out yourself in terms of what's the balance? Do you think those purity standards can be relaxed without harmful effects coming in, so as to better implement the recycling?
Let's see if this one is working still. Yes. Very good question, and of course completely impossible to answer, because it depends. And now I'm trying to express myself as a psychologist. It depends. It depends on situations, it depends on where, it depends on contact to what and what we're looking to. What we see in our laboratories when we work with contact problems and migration of chemistry, we see that sometimes the boundaries should be able to be relaxed. Can I go to the extent to say that this is a general answer? Of course not. I still believe that it's about finding specific boundaries for every single situation, and to try to make it so clear and so forward-thinking that those boundaries can be somewhat stable unless new findings come from the literature.
Questions? Someone from the table want to talk a little bit more, or so? Oh, sorry. Please, go ahead.
Cho San-ko with ILSI North America. This question is to the last speaker on sustainability. Obviously, you've done a lot of work on area of food waste across Europe. Based on your experience in multiple countries, what is the most compelling message that you can give to the consumer to incentivize them to practice recycling?
Very good question. I would try to answer it like this. I believe that if I look at examples of what is happening around us, I see that making things easier, so convenience, is a big driver. So how can we simplify the task of consumers to make the right choice? Could it be by design of materials? Could it be by design of solutions? Could it be by an interaction of materials and solutions? That specific example that I have been showing, we are seeing it applied in the very first application cases in Scandinavia now, with the interaction between the digital and the real world. It brings some promise because it's interacting with the person in the exact moment where you're making a choice. So that could be one possible thing. I really believe into streamlining the choice of materials. And I believe that streamlining will need to be different in different geographical realities. And it's going to be different if you are in a big cities, if you are downtown London, or if you are in a small village in the middle of nowhere. So the complexity increases if you go towards streamlining. But there are examples where streamlining of the choice of materials makes a big difference.
So that is mostly convenient, making the process more convenient for them to practice recycling. But is there an emotional reason that is compelling them to want to recycle? I mean, you mentioned that you now become a psychologist. So what is the human behavior, the message that is most compelling that can cross culture that says why recycling is important? I know there are a lot of messages that have been provided, but is there one based on your multi-country experience that's the most compelling emotional reason?
I would love to be able to answer to your question. I believe it's a very relevant one. And it is so relevant that in our packaging development team of scientists, we had 3 perception psychologists. They are working on this question. And they're working on how to make interactions, how to design interactions that will eventually give the expected outcome. We are just now in January starting a project focused on the consumer behavior related to on-the-go packaging. So maybe in a few months or in a year or so, I'll be able to give you more. We are working in my team on those issues.
My name is Yasu Abagas. I'm with Ajinomoto North America. So my question is to Dr. Garantes on the technology or nanoparticles. Can you talk about as far as for those that are used in food applications, the regulatory process, or the hurdles there that may be, and also how they would be labeled in products?
Can you repeat the first question? I couldn't hear it well.
So the regulatory approval process. So I guess just in terms of safety and process that goes with it, and incorporating them in foods. And the second question is, how would they be labeled in products?
Right. So I'm a chemist, and I actually came here to learn such things. Are you part of that industry of labeling and regulations?
Yeah, I will. I'm in scientific and regulatory affairs. Yeah.
So let's talk over lunch about it.
Chuck Saprinski, University of Wisconsin, excellent group of speakers. My question's for the last speaker. In Madison, Wisconsin, I think we have a pretty effective recycling program. People generally participate in it. But I wonder how effective it is in reducing, repurposing materials and reducing energy inputs, et cetera. And I'm thinking of plastics in particular, because it's my understanding that a lot of times, at least sometimes, plastics don't really get recycled into new products depending on the price of petroleum and everything else. So my question is, how do we get information to consumers on what's really an effective recycling program to reduce inputs, et cetera, and not just when it makes you feel good because you threw something in a bin and you think you've helped the world? I mean, how do we know when we're really have systems in place that are reducing inputs and aren't just making you feel like you're doing something good?
Another excellent dilemma, which of course I'm thriving in. I do not have an answer, and I definitely do not have a solution. I have a consideration connected to your question. And it would be like this. We are designing systems to handle a very large degree of complexity. And one thing that I believe we should try to do is introduce a kind of design thinking in designing recycling systems and materials and approaches for recycling. What I can see if we look around the world today is very, very often the authorities in charge of the system choose a solution, choose a scheme, and that scheme becomes essentially permanent over a very, very long period of time. I believe we should move towards a more dynamic and experimental-based way to handle recycling schemes. And again, it's a consideration. It's by no means even close to be an answer to your question. But to me, this interactivity and adaptability to the fact that society is changing and our behavior is changing is one key to make the efficiency, the efficacy of our efforts higher.
Thank you to the panel for all of your presentations. My name is Tara Acharya. I'm from the Campbell Soup Company. It strikes me that one of the themes that I saw sort of like a thread through all of the presentations was this concept of transparency and the fact that consumers really want to understand not just what's in their food, but how it's made. And then ultimately, what happens to the recycling of the packaging? How is that packaging handled? So I wonder if the panel could comment on that theme of transparency and where we are headed with consumer expectations around understanding the entire value chain.
Let me just It's a nice question. Yes, as I mentioned, I saw a few days ago, it's 84% of consumers wants to know the whole chain. So it's not only to see what's on the label. So they are concerned that how it was produced, if the animals were well treated, how's the production facility, how is disposal. And I don't know, I worked in an industry for a long time. I didn't see at that time concerns about that and being more transparent. But I think this is the way out. That's what I try to show. There are so many ways to start doing that. You would even have now, well, everyone has a cell phone. You could not only scan the QR code and see what's in there, but how it was produced and where it's the package going, how is the policy of the company. You can have also, how do you call that, augmented technology that you see that it's not that difficult. I think that we have to move into there. Otherwise, we're going to lose for, again, the blogs and the people selling bad things about food production, which is, you're gaining this game, I think.
That's the reason why we are moving towards to something called holistic innovation. That is, when you develop an innovation, you have to be careful about all the impacts that that innovation has on every single part of the chain. Yeah. So good point, Marcelo.
We have seen here really amazing technologies today and how to get products. I'm going to take the high pressure process as an example. And we saw that this can provide shelf-stable products with nutrition value, even with a cleaner label, being eco-friendly, better preserve the food because there is no thermal stress of it. Even having new textures and new possibilities to support innovation and consumer demands. Somehow there is a trend, small but very concerning for my taste, about ultra-processed foods. Dr. Cristianini mentioned it, and it comes from the same country as he does. Dr. Monteiro did develop this, and today we speak about NOVA classifications and things like that. So, do you think these high sophisticated processes are going to render in less processed foods, but being perceived like ultra processed foods? What do you think?
Yes, unfortunately, this guy comes from the same country as I do. Now, I keep trying to put him in the debates, but he's always skipping. I don't know. It's quite complex. The classification is there. I don't know if it's followed or not followed, but it's already there. And if you, I've been giving this talk on the ultra-processed food for a long time, and if you Google trends and try to match when this NOVA classification came up and how people were assessing Google, you see there is a very nice correlation, and the term is, from my point of view, is completely wrong. And we have two ways to fight it, to show that this is not really, again, my point of view, it's not really correct use of the term, but get the consumer aware of. As I said, we are speaking here for 200 people, 300 people, and we lose for Instagram and other things. And some of my students started some Instagram and blogs to try to fight against, but they're not big brothers, they're not actresses, and of course, the access to their Instagrams is not the same as any other famous people. What emerging technologies can bring, and it's not only emerging technologies, any technology, like people always complaining about thermal processing, and regular people think that canned food has a lot of additives and preservatives, which is not true. I mean, that's why it's thermal processed. And it's not a question of technology, I guess. It's a question of information. It's a question of transparency. And I think the industry people around here, you have to fight against it. But I understand, being there, that every time you try to raise a flag and say, hey, this is not ultra-processed, there will always be Monteiro people saying, but you were from the industry, you're working for the industry, or things like this, so that's why you're saying that's not. I don't know, we, scientific community, we need to think about that and try to put together like a public like this to think about how do we fight against it.
I
I do totally agree about that. There is a lot of concerns about that when the new technologies are coming to the industry because of the consumer perception, actually. For instance, ultrasound technology. If a consumer just read that this product has been processed by ultrasounds, for a consumer it looks like it's ultra processed, but it's not like that. So it's a matter of education, actually, and I believe we have a really challenge with that. Marcelo,
Hey, I want to make a question. How many of you have ever tried the HPP product? How many of you don't know you have? You see, I always made this question, how do we know it was HPP processed? We don't, because the industry doesn't want to put it there. It's high pressured process.
Yeah.
Consumer will see it and say, ooh, what is this?
That's too much.
So it's not because it's ultrasound technology or microwave technology. Microwave is even worse because everybody thinks microwave gives cancer or whatever. So it's not a question of the technology, it's a question of getting the consumer aware.
Some people even ask me, some consumers, when I talk about that, they even ask me, is this something that genetics or something like that? I mean, they are really scared about. So we have to be careful.
Well, the discussion is very rich, and we can stay here for a month, but this is something that we can't afford. So I have to thank you, everybody, at the main panel. Great participation, great presentations, great discussions. Thank you very much to all of you for being here. And I would remind you to please fill the session evaluation form at the app we already discussed earlier this morning. And the next session will be in this same room at 11 a.m. And I have probably a good news for most of you, and this is that tonight's reception dinner is going to be held indoors. So you don't need to take the penguin train for tonight. It will be at the Dunes Ballroom, and we expect all of you there, and enjoy your night. Thank you.